Awesome.
All right. Well, like Jennifer said, my name is Jayme. I'm not sure where to.
Yeah, it's kind of here. You
Okay.
can just talk to the room. It'll just follow you. It's okay.
Can everybody hear me? Or I guess, can anyone not hear me? Are we good on volume online?
Oh, I can hear you. My hand just said yes.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Awesome. Thank you.
I'm going to talk a little bit about today, so how to support loved ones with anxiety disorders. Go ahead to the next slide. I won't spend too much time on introductions because Jennifer already did that, but I'm Jayme. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. I graduated with my master's degree in counseling and psychological services in 2017 and have been a therapist ever since. And I own and operate OCD and Anxiety Wellness Collective, so a private practice that's really focused on whole person well-being. All right, so to start out, we're going to start with just what are different anxiety disorders. So anxiety itself is really our fear response being activated in the absence of a real threat. So we have all felt fear before. Everyone in the world has felt anxiety, even if you do not have an anxiety disorder. But it can become to the point where people meet criteria for disorders that are under the anxiety umbrella. So in all likelihood, even if you don't have a mental health disorder, you know someone who does, especially someone with an anxiety disorder. About 30% of US adults at some point in their life will meet diagnostic criteria for an anxiety disorder. So under that umbrella, what we mean by anxiety disorders, there's generalized anxiety disorder. This is people who worry excessively about anything and everything, like finances and friendships and anything that's going on in their lives. Specific phobias is more, instead of generalized, more specific. So people who are worried about something in particular. So really common ones are like animals, bugs, heights, water, all sorts of vomit, fainting, all sorts of different things. So just more specific as far as the anxiety or what triggers the anxiety. There's also panic disorder. So a panic attack is an abrupt surge of anxiety that happens within a couple minutes and comes with a whole bunch of physical sensations as well. So things like sweating, shaking, dizziness, feeling lightheaded, dissociation, derealization, depersonalization, really intense surge of fear. And what can happen is people who experience panic attacks can sometimes then start to worry about future panic attacks. So that's panic disorder, where people might start, not leaving their home because what if I have a panic attack? Agoraphobia often goes hand in hand with panic disorder. So this is when people are really worried about like enclosed spaces or crowded places or leaving their homes at all. Social anxiety disorder is when individuals have fears around socializing with other people. We are biologically wired for social connection. We need it just like we need food and water. So sometimes people can get really anxious about social relationships as well. Separation anxiety disorder is exactly what it sounds like. So we see a lot of this in kids where separating from a caregiver can feel really hard. So things like sleepovers or even going to school can feel really anxiety provoking as well. Selective mutism is usually again with kiddos when their anxiety makes it difficult for them to even communicate. So they will oftentimes communicate like with peers just fine, but maybe not with adults because of the anxiety. And then illness anxiety disorder is actually in a separate category in the DSM, but I included it on here because it is also anxiety related. So illness anxiety is excessive fear around different illnesses or disease, and that could be anything at all. So those are anxiety disorders. I also treat OCD and related disorders too, and actually hoarding disorder is in the DSM under that category as well. So These OCD and related disorders also have an anxiety component. It's just not just anxiety. There's other factors playing into it. So under that category, there's obsessive compulsive disorder, hoarding disorder, body dysmorphic disorder. So feeling like parts of your body are disfigured or deformed in ways that other people can't see. And then trichotillomania and excoriation, these are body-focused repetitive behaviors. So trick is hair pulling, and excoriation is skin picking. And these are anxiety-based disorders as well. And then the last category on here is trauma and stressor-related disorders. So in that category, there's post-traumatic stress disorder, acute stress disorder, and adjustment disorders as well. And all of these can come with anxiety. So first, we're going to talk about what's not helpful for people with anxiety. So I would love to I didn't put anything on the screen right away. That'll be the next clip away, but we're going to hold off on that because I would love first to just get a little bit of audience feedback. Anyone ever go to someone for support and feel worse afterwards?
Yes.
Yes. Anyone willing to share like an example of what happened, or like a time that happened, what that person's support was?
I'll go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say toxic positivity. When I come with like something I'm really worried about, it's like, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be great, it'll turn out wonderful.
Yes, that's a very common one where it's just think positive, right? Like if you just think positive, it'll manifest itself and everything will be fine.
Go ahead, Annika.
Yeah.
I was going to say, when people say, oh, just calm down, it's
Oh yes. There's a meme or a quote about that. Like it's never in the history of being told to calm down because anyone ever actually calms down.
I would say the opposite, where, well, I've seen that situation before and you should prepare for the worst.
Oh yeah, with feeding, yeah, you should be anxious. Yeah,
It's not helpful. This is how that's going to turn out.
Yes, so there are a lot of ways that and I've done this too, right? That we accidentally try to give support, but end up really falling short or making it even worse. And it can be really well intentioned. Like it can be, like someone who's like, just think positive. They're not trying to say like, this is so easy and simple. This is stupid. Why are you upset about that? Like, but that's what can come across is that invalidation. It's like, oh, I guess it was that easy. I should just think positive. And it then can feel like something's wrong with me. So great examples. So if you want to go ahead, I'll kind of give you my list. There's a couple that have asterisks by it because they can depend on the situation. But a lot of times what happens again is people very well intentioned will end up making things worse, sometimes out of frustration, because it can be frustrating to like have space and hold space for somebody who is suffering and maybe isn't doing anything about it, or like we think that they should be doing something different than they are doing, and it can feel frustrating. So things like just like yelling, dismissing, ignoring, or criticizing, judging, all of those things are going to make it worse. I think also a common mishap that can happen is people very well intentioned can accommodate anxiety in other people. So like a mom who has a really anxious kiddo who doesn't want to go to school, and then they let the kiddo stay home because that relieves the anxiety. In the short term, yes, it does. In the long term, what that mom just did is tell her kid school is dangerous, you need to stay home. And now that kid's not going to want to go to school again. So family accommodations, we're going to talk a little bit more about in a different slide. But that can also be really unhelpful, especially for anxiety disorders specifically. I put a couple of things on here that might be surprising. So problem solving. A lot of times people come to us with problems. They don't want us to solve it. They want us to listen. They just want to be heard. They just want to be validated. And then when you validate and hear them out, they probably can solve it on their own, which is going to be more likely that they'll actually follow through and all that kind of stuff. what happens with problem solving at somebody is basically what can happen is it feels like to that person, like, oh, I'm so stupid, I should have just done this thing and I would be fine. And that is really invalidating and makes us feel even worse when we're anxious, right? Like, I just should have been able to figure this out. I also put on there forcing others to face fears. So I work a lot with anxiety disorders. Part of the treatment is exposure therapy. We are facing fears on purpose. I am never forcing that. This is always something that's collaborative and agreed upon. And people get to not do exposures. If we look at, if we're like, okay, next week we're gonna, go to a certain place that's really scary for you, and then that week comes and they don't want to do it, we don't do it. That we don't force that, because that can make the anxiety even worse as well. Humor, I put an asterisk by. I think humor can be awesome as a coping skill, and I use it myself too. And we have to be careful with humor, because it can feel, if we use it inappropriately, it can feel like I'm laughing at you, not like with you about something. So again, that's just a caution on there. It can be really helpful to laugh about certain things. And making it about you, I also put an asterisk on that. Sometimes it's really helpful to validate, like, oh, I've totally felt that before, and like be with that person, like come together. But if someone's coming to you with a problem and then you all of a sudden are like, oh my gosh, let me tell you about my problem, that's not support anymore. That's not validating anymore. So we can talk more about this stuff in the questions part too, if anyone has any questions about what's not helpful. Okay, so now we're gonna watch just a really short film. This is from Brene Brown on empathy. Hopefully. Okay.
Very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
How do you mute it?
Well, here's where we're gonna edit later.
Yeah.
There we go.
So, while you're working on the presentation, so just to recap, I think that's kind of a silly, goofy, short video, but it really does explain like that toxic positivity, right? At least that you have, I can't remember what they said now, but right where we feel uncomfortable, especially when someone that we love and are really close with, we feel uncomfortable that they're suffering, right? And then we want to like fix it and make it better, and that can just feel really, really invalidating. And like you're not listening, not hearing them. We're going to talk a little bit more about like what to do and add to some of what the clip said from Brene Brown. But first, before we go into validation, one of the best things you can do if you know someone in your life has a mental health disorder, and not even just an anxiety disorder, but any mental health disorder, and they're a loved one, is do your homework. Know what it means. There is so much misinformation out there about mental health still that can be really stigmatizing and really inaccurate and can prevent people from getting the help that they need. For example, OCD. A lot of people think of OCD as, oh, people are just really neat and clean. That doesn't seem like it's bad. That's not what OCD is at all. So I think it can be really, really, really important to just get information yourself, so that you know what the disorder is, you know what the treatment is, and you can help with that hope for people that they're not alone and there is hope out there. So I put a ton of different organizations. There's so many out there. These are just a few that are related to anxiety disorders specifically, and then psychology kind of more as a whole as well. But there's so many resources out there, and knowing that information about the person that you're close with and just showing that interest can really be a game changer. I go to therapy myself, and my therapist got engaged, and she said her fiance has ADHD, and so she was reading about ADHD because she was like, well, I should probably have a manual if I'm going to marry him. So it's little things like that that can really make a big difference. The other thing, really specifically for anxiety disorders, if you're supporting someone with an anxiety disorder, is just to normalize fear and worry. Like I said in the beginning, everybody in this room has felt anxiety at some point in their life. And that is because we are built to survive. And when anything threatens that survival, our nervous system reacts to it. So this includes perceived threats. That's what an anxiety disorder is, right? So someone who's really worried about what if people are judging me, social anxiety. There isn't a real threat happening, but their nervous system is perceiving a threat. They might not like me. And again, we are biologically geared for social connection. We need humans just like we need food. So our nervous system is awesome. And in the absence of an actual threat, it can be really unhelpful. So we don't have time tonight to go through the whole polyvagal theory, but I do want to just introduce what our nervous systems are designed to do. So we'll start at that bottom, the green part, the social engagement. This is our parasympathetic nervous system response. This is when we feel safe, when we are not perceiving a threat. So you'll see things on there like we are calm, settled, grounded, we're curious and open, mindful and present. This is where we're able to digest food, our blood flow is going all over our body. Everything is kind of functioning in the normal capacity. And when we perceive a threat, whether it's a real threat or perceived threat, what happens is we go into our parasympathetic nervous system response, which is the opposite response. This is an activated response, the fight or flight response. So our brains really quickly, when we are perceiving a threat, will go, okay, can I fight my way out of this? And if not, then the next option is, can I flee? Can I get out of this? It's avoidance that we see a lot with anxiety disorders. And if neither of those are going to work, if neither of those are possible or likely to relieve the distress, The last option is actually the complete collapse of our nervous system. So this is the top red parts. This is our freeze response, where essentially, so in our sympathetic nervous system, when we're activated, a whole bunch of changes happen in our body. So our breathing changes, we get that shallow chest breathing, we're breathing in a bunch of air to get ready to fight or flight. Our blood flow changes, so it goes to our major muscle groups to get ready to fight or flight. You might get cold, clammy hands because it goes away from our extremities into our muscles. A whole bunch of things are happening internally. Our brains, essentially the frontal lobe, which is responsible for thinking and reasoning, goes offline because we're actually in danger. We don't want to be like, what do I have to do about this, right? We got to react. So the impulsivity can come in there as well with the fight or flight response. And we're not digesting food. This is why a lot of people with anxiety disorders have co-occurring like stomach issues or digestive issues as well, because they're continuing to kind of cut off their digestion. And what happens is actually the top half of our digestion stops, the bottom half speeds up, so we got to go to the bathroom as well. So all of those things are the activating the sympathetic nervous system response. But if our brain determines I can't fight my way out and I can't flee my way away from this danger, I have to just survive through it. That's the freeze response is our last option. And again, like I said, this is the collapse of the nervous system. So this is where we get kind of numbness, depression, dissociation, kind of thoughts of death come up in this stage as well. So these are all things that everyone in the world is wired for. And this is really, really helpful and really awesome when we are in immediate danger. The problem is if we are not in factual danger, these things can just be really unhelpful. So people with anxiety disorders are really kind of stuck in that yellow. That's one of the other things that happens. A healthy nervous system can fluctuate between these states. So if we all have stressors, we all have stuff that goes on in our life, and a little bit of stress can help us problem solve and resolve whatever the issue is. But that's how the nervous system can come back down. Sometimes people get stuck in these different states. So someone with depression is getting stuck at the freeze. Someone with anxiety is getting stuck in that sympathetic nervous system response. So again, this is just to normalize. We all feel scared sometimes. We've all had histories of like, don't have your limb hanging off the bed or your monster is gonna grab it, like silly things like that. We all feel fear. We all have things that are difficult for us. So normalizing that can be really, really helpful so that people don't feel alone. The other thing that can be really helpful is validation, which we're going to talk more about. I have a couple more clips just to show the concept of validation, but then encouragement and reinforcement. So we want to encourage people that they can do it, that it's hopeless, right? Like that's a huge thing with a lot of mental health disorders is that it gets bad enough, it can feel very hopeless. And so really like encouraging, this is why it's important to have knowledge about the disorder and the treatment, encouraging that there is hope and they can do it and they can overcome these things can be really helpful. And reinforcing that what can be really difficult with anxiety disorders is reinforcing the absence of behaviors, right? So sometimes someone with anxiety disorder might ask like 10 times for reassurance that you're not medicine, right? And as they start to progress and grow and go through therapy, they might stop asking for that reassurance. And it's hard for other people to notice that because of the absence of a behavior. But it's so important to see that progress and to name that progress and reinforce that, like, hey, I see that we're making movement, that you're doing better. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about validation because this is a big one. This is so, so important. Validation is really recognizing the kernel of truth in the other person's experience. I don't have to agree with it. I don't have to like it, but I'm gonna acknowledge and validate what is valid about somebody else's experience. So even if I don't have social anxiety, if somebody is coming to me and like worried, like, oh my gosh, I'm worried that these people are judging me, I'm not going to say, well, that's stupid. That'd be super validating, right? That would be like, your experience is wrong. And that's not helpful. Now I just shamed the person who feels anxious and now they feel worse, right? Validation would be like, oh yeah, social situations can be really hard, right? Even if I don't have social anxiety, I can still validate the valid, right? Um, yeah, so before we watch a couple videos that kind of explains this or gives examples a little bit better, there's the green part on validation. This is directly from dialectical behavior therapy or DBT. So how do we validate? First, active listening. What else is really invalidating is if someone's like pouring their heart out to you and you are on your phone. That is not helpful. That does not show that person that you care or are listening to what they're actually saying. Another way to validate is to accurately reflect whatever that person said. So just say back what you heard them say. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. But if someone's, you know, telling you about a fight with their friend that they had, you can just be like, oh, it sounds like you two got in a really bad argument, and that can be enough to validate. Naming unspoken nonverbal cues. This is where we can do a little bit of mind reading. We have to be open to being wrong, because sometimes emotions come out differently for different people. But you know, someone who's really anxious might not make eye contact at all, or they might kind of like, you know, close in on themselves, get smaller. That feels safer. And you can just acknowledge that without shaming, right? So like, hey, you seem like really down right now. Is everything okay? Right? Like just naming some of the things that you're seeing as well. Communicating understanding. This is, like I said, kind of the heart and soul of validation. I understand and acknowledge your experience, even if I don't agree with it or like it. So underneath that, I put behaviors are caused. This is where we do want to be careful. Sometimes when people are feeling activated, they might behave in ways that are not in alignment with who they really are, what their values are, that kind of thing. So we don't have to validate the behavior that happened, but we can validate the emotion behind it, right? Someone, you know, just like yells and screams and loses it after a day where they have just like had everything go wrong. I'm not going to validate like, oh yeah, you should just yell and scream at everybody, but I am going to validate you had a really shitty day, right? Like that makes sense, right? So communicating what you can understand, what is valid about their experience. Which I kind of already spoke to. The next one, acknowledge the valid. Oftentimes that means naming the emotion behind whatever the behavior is. And then show equality, common humanity. So again, like I said, talking about yourself can feel invalidating if you totally take over the conversation, but it can be really helpful for people to feel connected to you if you can be like, oh yeah, I know someone who also struggles with that, or I've struggled with that in the past, or I've felt that way before. Just knowing that they're not alone. Empathic listening is very similar to validation. I just added it on there just to kind of reinforce some of these concepts. So really being non-judgmental. It's never helpful to be judgmental towards other people when they're coming to you with some of the things that they're suffering with. It's normal to judge those things. So it's okay to have judgments. We just don't want to say them out loud. We need to do that work on our own. Undivided attention, again, this is just active listening. Allowing silence. We don't always have to talk. We can just be. And sometimes that's even the most powerful thing, is to just like, I think in this video, she was like, I don't even know what to say right now, but I'm here, right? Like that can be powerful too. We don't have to fill the silence or talk our way through. Restate to clarify. So again, just accurate reflection and listening for the underlying message. So it's kind of listen to what they're not saying, but might be thinking or feeling and guessing that. So I have a couple videos that do a really great job of showing what validation is and is not. So I think you can go to the next one. There should be, oh no, there's no video. Okay.
Sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
See, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just, sometimes it's like, there's this achy, I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
That sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. If you would just...
Don't.
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep on?
So it's kind of silly, goofy video, but you can see when he tried to problem solve after, that's not what she wanted, and it escalated her emotions, right? She got even more upset. And as soon as he just was like, I'm listening, I hear you, that sounds really hard, it was, oh, yeah, thank you. And that really, so kind of goofy, but we're going to listen or watch one more example as well. Oh, there we go. Hopefully we'll listen to one more video. There we go.
This Charmin Ultra Soft Smooth Tear has wavy edges.
It's no ordinary square. Charmin.
Oh, the stuffed animal Hall of Fame! My rocket! Wait, Riley and I were still using that rocket. It still has some song power left. Who's your friend who likes to play? No, you can't take my rocket to the top. Riley and I are going to the moon. Riley can't be done with me.
Hey, it's gonna be okay. We can fix this. We just need to get back to headquarters. Which way to the train station?
I had a whole trip planned for us.
Hey, who's ticklish, huh? Here comes the tickle monster. Hey, Bing Bong, look at this. Oh, here's a fun game. You point to the train station and we all go there. Won't that be fun? Come on, let's go to the train station.
I'm sorry they took your rocket. They took something that you loved. It's gone. Forever.
Sadness. Don't make him feel worse.
Sorry.
It's all I had left of Riley.
I bet you and Riley had great adventures.
Oh, they were wonderful. Once we flew back in time, we had breakfast twice that day.
Sadness!
It sounds amazing. I bet Riley liked it.
Oh, she did. We were best friends.
Yeah, it's sad.
I'm okay now. Come on. The train station is this way.
How did you do that?
I don't know. He was sad, so I listened to what...
Hey! There's the train!
So again, another kind of silly, goofy clip, but a perfect example of the toxic positivity, right? Joy was like, let's just keep going and let's get, back to the train or whatever they were doing. And that wasn't helping. That was not actually helping Bing Bong feel heard or listened to. And Sadness sat in the sadness with him instead through that experience, and then he got through it and they continued on. So again, a little bit goofy, but some good examples of how validation can really help us work. Another thing that is really, really important when you're supporting someone is that support looks different for everybody, right? There's different love languages. We know that, different ways. You might say something to me that feels really awesome, and then you say it to Jennifer and she's like, get out of here, right? So be curious, ask questions, personalize the support to the person that you are trying to support. And it's okay to ask questions in the moment too. What can I do to support you right now is awesome. And people might not know. That's okay. If the answer is I don't know, then just leaving that open. Like, please let me know if there's something that I can do, or just shut up and be there. Physically be there with them through the emotion that is like in the trenches work that is so important for people to not feel alone. And be open to feedback. You can always come back later and learn from experiences like, hey, I'm not sure that I was really helpful for you in that moment that you were really upset. What would have been more helpful, or was that helpful? And I just need to like be okay with that, right? Collaborate, work together on this. You can't read other people's minds. And again, personalize that support, because it's what can feel supportive to one person can feel really invalidating to another. Okay, now we're going to talk more about accommodation. So again, this is more specific for anxiety disorders. I'm going to explain this diagram on the screen first, and kind of explain why accommodating anxiety behaviors is actually unhelpful for people with anxiety disorders, even though a lot of times it's coming out of love and support. We want them to not feel anxious. So I'll give an example too, but first let's just go to this the cycle of anxiety or avoidance. I teach this to all of my clients with anxiety disorders. So what happens with an anxiety disorder, there can be some type of trigger, and this could be literally anything at all. This can be feeling a sensation in their body that all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I have cancer, right? Like something is happening, whether you can see it or not. There's going to be something that triggers the anxiety. And then there's that surge of fear. So someone with health anxiety, they feel some weird sensation in their body and they interpret that as some horrible disease. And all of a sudden their fear response gets activated. And now they might need to feel like they have to escape. So I need to really ignore I never go to the doctor, right? Because if I go to the doctor, I'm going to find out that something horrible is wrong with me. This is the flight response, the avoidance response, right? And this is dangerous and I need to get out. What happens is immediately that actually feels really good for people with anxiety disorders. They're like, oh, good. Okay, I don't have to worry about that, right? This is that negative reinforcement. In the short term, it relieves anxiety. The problem is what just happened in the brain is that just reinforced that whatever they're anxious about truly is dangerous and they need to avoid it in order to stay safe and feel better. So that actually intensifies the anxiety. So go back to the example of the kiddo who doesn't want to go to school because they're anxious. Mom and dad let them stay home, and then the next day anxiety is even worse, but the parents are like, well, you got to go to school now because you missed yesterday. And then it even escalates more from there. Kid throws temper tantrum, right? Like they're not feeling safe, and the avoidance helped last time, so why can't I do that again? So again, this is what this cycle not only goes around and around, but it grows and grows and grows. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and lives get smaller and smaller and smaller when we do that. So that is why we want to reduce and eventually eliminate accommodating behaviors. This doesn't mean that if you have a loved one who is really scared of spiders, that you're like, the next time you see a spider at home, you're like, you have to kill it, right? Like, again, we're not forcing anything, right? But we are going to have conversations about like, hey, here's ways that I've changed my behavior to try to help you with your anxiety, but it's not actually helping anymore. So how are we going to reduce this and eliminate it over time? In therapy, we do a lot of like family contracting work. So we'll do even what we call an accommodation hierarchy with clients who have, when the parents and family members are really accommodating a lot of behaviors that are not actually helping the anxiety. We'll kind of create a list of like, okay, this is the first accommodation that's going to go, and then this one after you master that, and so on.
Can we give so I think when I think of that accommodation, I think of paying for a storage unit.
Yes. Yes.
Is an accommodation, or and I think another one that I read was not being involved in hosting things because you're house isn't suitable, but then doing all the cleaning and
Yeah.
posting.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So again, we want to collaborate.
You don't slap them with it.
Yes, you do not just like cold turkey stop everything that you're doing for them, because that is gonna cause a lot of other issues and a lot of broken trust as well. So this is a collaborative process. The person you're supporting needs to be on board with this as well. And it can be gradual. It's not all at once, all or nothing. But again, trying to reduce those accommodations that aren't actually helping that person. Another really awesome thing is modeling, facing fears, doing hard things, and taking care of yourself and trusting yourself. So again, like I said before, even if you don't have an anxiety disorder, I'm sure there's something that it's hard for you to do or scary for you to do. And when you can show other people that you are actively facing your fears, that can encourage other people to actively face their fears as well and to do hard things. Same with self-care. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in the next slide, I believe. But really modeling, when you are supporting someone, the whole idea of like put your oxygen mask on before theirs, right? You have to be capable and able to support someone. If you're depleted, then you might not have the capacity to support in a way that's actually going to help. So modeling that self-care and boundaries, we'll talk about that too, can be really important. And I added self-trust in there because a lot of times with anxiety disorders, people do not trust their ability to cope, or really just don't trust themselves at all. And so modeling, again, in more difficult situations where you might doubt yourself or question yourself, modeling that self-trust instead can be really helpful. Okay, I think this is the last piece that I'll speak on before questions. Again, like I said, taking care of yourself is so important. This is something mental health professionals have to learn as well. And part of our training is how to continue to show up for our clients. And taking care of ourselves is so important. So basic needs, we all have to eat, sleep, get some type of movement in our day. Again, like I said, we're wired for social connection. We literally need that as much as we need food and water. We have a loneliness pandemic going on in the US. So having that social connection yourself is really helpful. Hygiene practices are also so important. And then getting some type of connection with nature, and in Minnesota, especially in the winter, sunlight or happy lights. So attending to those basic needs, making sure you're not abandoning your needs to help the loved one. Your needs need to still be met to really effectively help your loved one. Boundaries are so important. So boundaries, I think, can be really hard for people, and we don't have time to go into how to do boundaries today. But this can be just really helpful. I mean, boundaries are basically, this is how I can love you and love me at the same time, right? This is what's okay and what's not okay. And really clearly communicating that. So if your loved one is, having a hard day, but you had a hard day too, it's okay to say, I don't have the capacity. Can I help you find somebody else? Right? Like, you get to have boundaries, or, hey, I need an hour to myself. Can we come back to this later? You get to have boundaries, and it's just important to communicate those clearly, because we cannot read each other's minds, so we cannot know each other's minds. Taking breaks, this is also really helpful. Things are escalating and getting out of control, and you're trying to support, but it's not landing as support. Take a break. Both nervous systems need to calm down, and continuing to engage is not likely to help. Again, we want to do this in a really skillful way, not just storming out the door, but really being like, hey, I think we're both really activated right now. Let's take a break and come back in 10 minutes, an hour, tomorrow, whatever it is, and having time. Coming back is very important, though. Otherwise, it's voidance. That's not helpful. Having your own support team. A lot of times I talk to parents about getting their own therapists and support as well, or partners too. It can be a lot to support someone with a mental health disorder. And yeah, therapy, I think, can be helpful for everybody, but I'm a therapist, so. There's also lots and lots of support groups. So for like loved one, for family members and loved ones of people with OCD, there's lots of support groups in the cities. NAMI has some stuff, I believe, as well, but there are lots of options for meeting other people who also have loved ones with disorder as well. There's also online communities, so I don't think I put this in the resources, but AT Parenting Survival, it's anxious toddlers parenting survival. They have a website, and it's really a community of parents with anxious kiddos. You can connect with other parents, and that can be really helpful, I think, to hear other people's struggles and get other ideas as well. And then the last piece is just continue to engage in your values-based behaviors as well. Work towards your goals. Again, this is kind of some more modeling as well as really bringing meaning and purpose in your own life as well. These are just a few books. Again, these are more specific for people with anxiety disorders, but these are books that are available for loved ones. So with one exception. So Digging Out, this is for helping loved ones managing hoarding disorder, clutter. Breaking Free of Child Anxiety and OCD, that's for parents, again, for, with parents with kiddos that are anxious. And that has a lot of information about family accommodations and how to reduce those. Loving Someone with OCD and When a Family Member Has OCD, those are both great books for if you have a loved one with OCD. I added the Patient Guide to Mood and Anxiety Disorders. I just added it on there because navigating the mental health system is so difficult for someone who is not suffering. So that is actually a guide for patients, for people trying to get into mental health treatment. But it can be helpful if loved ones have that resource too, of like, hey, I can help you, go through this process. And helping them find a therapist can be helpful because it's hard. It's a lot of work. And a lot of therapists are full, so it can feel really defeating. I also put on there When a Loved One Won't Seek Mental Health Treatment. That could be a whole other presentation on its own, but that's a great resource as well, how you can really take care of yourself. And
let's have you back for that one.
The frustration that can come with that, because you can see that they're suffering and they don't have to. And then the last one I put on there was Parent Guide to Care Pulling Disorders. So those are kind of more specific to different disorders within anxiety. So I will wrap it up. I'm sorry that took a little bit longer than I thought it would. Any questions, comments, or things to discuss?
Fantastic. I'm really glad we recorded that. So let's go ahead and stop recording so that people can ask private questions if they want.
Yeah.